So I faced an experience, the one of methane emission around my area. And I realized that intensive or methane emission reduces the growth of trees. And in Africa, in most of the African countries, there's no waste management. And the degradation of organic matters is the emission of methane and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is good for the forest, but not methane. Methane reduces the growth of a tree. And in Congo Basin area, where one of the most economic activity is timber exploitation, is forest cutting trees for economic reason. There's no processing of the waste. 60 to 70% of a tree is a waste and become a source of methane emission. A source of methane emission in the forest is also the intensification of the loss of biodiversity. Nothing is done to process that 70% of waste in the forest area, and it causes 22 to 25% of greenhouse gas emission. I'm still asking whether there's something to do, because government does not seem to be very interested or very worried in those problems. And if tomorrow we face the reduction of the rainforest of the Congo Basin, it means that you still cause a split in the environment. And we are facing mangroves degradation. And mangroves are also important sink of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases. Nothing is done to protect the mangroves. And we know the most important role of the mangroves in an area or in a country. What are we going to do to help those countries, those developing countries, to mitigate climate change, to adapt to climate change? Because if we are developing biofuel, there are many fruits in the forest, in the rainforest, that can be processed and produced by biodiesel. Nothing is done, so we need capacity building. We need support for research. We need support to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. But when? That's my question. Thank you.
I don't know enough about all the international processes for climate change mitigation. I don't know enough about the international processes that are going on for climate change mitigation. But there are some initiatives for rehabilitating mangrove areas that are planned throughout the Pacific. IUCN has a mangroves program. We did have a representative of the IUCN here earlier who talked about it. But I guess all we can say is the scale is that the small scale initiatives are all going to help. That's all I could offer for that. Anybody else want to comment on mangrove rehabilitation or carbon sequestration from blue carbon?
Yeah, I'm not going to respond to any of the science that is being discussed here because I'm not a scientist. But I just want to, because your question is what are we going to do, and we had a lot of those same questions before when we didn't have the Mitigation Challenge or all these initiatives that are now catalyzing more and more initiatives either within our own region or outside. After the the launch of the Mitigation Challenge, now we're having all sorts of other regional initiatives that are going on in Micronesia because of that. and those initiatives may have been started prior to the Micronesia Challenge, but they, getting more fire as all this regional collaboration is starting to happen. So maybe if there was a process that is similar that can be started in Africa or in a region of Africa. I know it's a very large country, but if you can do maybe a region in Africa and start to get some of your leaders, interested in some of this, getting some regional collaboration, it might work. So, and how do you do that? How we did it in Micronesia is we started with getting our conservation leaders together to start working together. That's what's called the Micronesians in Island Conservation Peer Learning Network, and there's lessons learned that May is holding in her hand, and maybe you can read that and maybe start your own peer learning network that can start to catalyze some of these things that you have all these questions for. Otherwise, I just don't know how you can start it. Maybe a learning exchange would help you to a region that's already doing these types of things. Thank you.
If this peer learning network that Willie is referring to also is before the Micronesia Challenge, and a lot of what they did helped spur the Micronesia Challenge, and she keeps raising her hand. Oh, and check out the sign, because actually if you go to that Knowledge Cafe, you'll be able to hear more about the Micronesians and island conservation. We have several handouts out there if you're interested as well.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate all the islanders at the panel, even Nicholas. You're from a big island. But I can see you're all islanders by heart and nature, and I'm very heartened by the wealth and diversity and extent of island approaches. I mostly try to stay home in Samoa and be a mum and do a little bit of work. But I do have a plea, and Kate, I'm going to steal your byline. And it's not a small plea, and it's one that really bugs me. Okay, island countries, countries with islands, but you're all ocean states and ocean nations. In none of the maps I saw any of you present did you show the true domain of islands. So island nations have huge areas of exclusive economic zone. That's your sea country, that's your domain, that's your real wake-up call. In the Pacific, it's not just about the land issues, as important as they are. And I do have a plea that when you present, please show the true domain of islands. The islands in the ocean that surrounds them and that connects them. In that region I live in, the Pacific Islands region, the surface of the island areas is about 10% of the planet's surface. And it's actually larger than the surface of the moon. Yet we know more about the surface of the moon than what we do beyond the shallow zones of our region. And so I would just make a plea that to remember that your true domain includes your exclusive economic zones and responsibilities to the high seas for the oceans that connect you. And next time when I come and listen to present, I hope to see that true domain really well presented. But congratulations to you all.
I would also agree with what David has just said, because I'm coming from islands, and a lot of issues, for example, which are common to islands when it comes to capacity, it's because of our size. And just like she mentioned, look at the size of the sea, but look in terms of the population and the resources we have. So I think that will really trigger something to say, despite we are small, but we've got big responsibilities. And I think something quite interesting, I mean, it can actually trigger a lot of thinking about this. Because the other question which I wanted, it wasn't just sort of like a question, but given that there are so many islands, and I think it's quite some very good initiatives trying to share like similar programs and sort of like establishing some sort of like frameworks and having some sort of like platforms where we can share knowledge, share practices, what is being done on one side and the other. And given that we're doing a lot of those things, but when we're trying to, for example, when we're trying to look at the issue of climate change, we have to suffer as a result of other activities. And when I'm trying to look into the whole, sort of like the whole thing, you know, the whole, how can I say, given that we islands are working together, but where, for example, where does the developed countries come into the equations? We are doing our part, but there's a big missing in the equation. And how does that fit? It's just something I'm trying to wonder how it all fits. You know, we can be shouting, we can be crying for help, but those that are supposed to provide us with the help, how do we do all those things? Just something I'm trying to ask.
I just, thanks for that comment, and it really made me think of the importance of islands having a peer learning network on green economy approaches and challenges and lessons. And what I was told on the little piece of work we did on pulling together what green economy means for the Caribbean, a comment I got from IID was that we need to be more clear on what we are asking the developed countries to do, what we are asking the others to do to help us move towards a green economy, because we were very focused internally. And I think there's a big opportunity for islands to work together to communicate those policy messages to the rest of the world on how they can better help us move towards a green economy and how they can change their economic development choices so that we can survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, because I was just going to reference that possibility about actually all these organizations and the regional ones, and also being smaller islands which are most vulnerable to what is actually happening, having a voice to the more developing nations saying that this is affecting us and making it quite substantial, and also bringing in things that happen in Cameroon and such. And so coming together and actually being a voice right back, so you just hit exactly what I was thinking, so thank you.
Kate, I'd like to kind of flip the question back on our island friend over there, because, and I'd like to ask you, because one of the things that you and I talk about too is how do we actually get the countries, the island countries, large ocean countries, to get their message out there. I mean, because in some ways we can do the work internally, as you said, we're doing our part. How do we get the others to do their part? But what are we doing, Kate, and what can we do to help you to get our message out there? You know, that's one of the things, is how do we work with you to do that? What do you need from us, Kate?
That's not an easy question for me to answer, actually. I think I want to answer it, I want to touch a little bit on the last point, which was, you know, I think Nicole was making about islands kind of having a better idea of what they need and asking for that. And I think some of the messages I've really heard from some island leaders, in particular from Micronesia, is some of the reason why I think in some ways people are listening to them is because they've thought through, obviously, and not just the leaders, but the country has identified what it wants to do. It's kind of figured out what it needs to do it. What's it going to cost to do this? What will it cost to do the things that we want to do? And then it's looking at how it can actually, and this is what Willie was touching on in his presentation, how can we actually resource that ourselves? What can we contribute to addressing this issue? And then what help do we need from other people? What is the help that we need from other people? And I think it really touches on an issue we saw at the last COP of the CBD, where you're starting to see big countries, for example, from Europe, asking some of the small island countries for help with solutions to really difficult problems in terms of negotiations around financing. that you didn't see 5 or 10 years ago. You don't see someone like Germany asking someone like Micronesia for help on solving a problem. But you're starting to see that because islands are articulating their problems differently and articulating their solutions. And I think the way that what we do as a partnership is we work with people that want to work with us. So I've got to reflip that question and say, if you want to work with the Global Island Partnership, or even, I guess, some of these people here, think about what it is you actually want to do. What do you want to achieve? What is it that's going to make a difference for your country in the short and long term? And think with us about how we can help you as a partnership kind of achieve that. It's not that, our partnership is not about supplying resources to people to do things. It's about helping think about what can we do ourselves, what do we need help with. And it really is changing the articulation of island problems at the global level, while still saying we have really critical problems, because no one would be here if we didn't think that we have lots of things to address. But I think also the fact that we're at the World Conservation Congress at IUCN is a really great opportunity when people are starting to ask for things like peer learning networks, because a secretariat as IUCN is, as well as its members, has people all over the world, potentially can find a way to bring people together to have that kind of conversation. And perhaps that's something we could think about in the next World Conservation Congress, how to bring something together like that. I'm not saying I would do that, I'm suggesting that we would suggest it. Yeah. I didn't say the one in here.
I was just trying to think of something also now. Given there was the idea about the oceans, for example, we already have the developed countries. They rely a lot on us as islanders. And maybe this is something they don't, I wouldn't say they don't, or they don't appreciate it at all. But given the oceans, the fisheries, we're talking about food security, I think we are important. You see, because the question I was trying to sort of like get to at the beginning is like, whatever we are doing, whatever problems we are facing, we need them more as they need us. So that was a point which I really just wanted to sort of like stress about.
Hi, my name's James Hardcastle. I've just moved to an island, but it's landlocked and it's very cold. I just want to pick up on a point there and just mention fish. And I'd just like each of you maybe to just mention, in terms of your presentation and your work, what's your relationship with fish and fisheries, and in particular the resources that can come from fisheries, fishes and food security. Is that a good connection? Fishes and financing, conservation trusts, and for Glisper, how do you relate your work to kind of global dialogue on fisheries? Fish.
It's fish, and in the context of food security, am I correct? So one of the reasons I've heard the Pacific Island countries talk about why they don't want to be labeled green, looking at green economies, and the reason why they're looking at blue economies is they realize that food security is in the ocean for islands. So James is asking, what are you guys doing in the context of fish? And he wants each of you to answer.
I'll answer very quickly. I mean, the Caribbean Sea is very complex to manage the fishery because obviously is a transnational issue to manage, and there's a lot of policy work being done in the Caribbean to try and foster collaboration among all of the countries to manage the Caribbean Sea collectively, including setting up something called the Caribbean Sea Commission, which is very high-level policy makers who can collaborate and dialogue, and layers of governance all the way down to fisher folk on the ground who really are able to have a voice in saying how fisheries are managed and to improve governance. So there's tons of effort being put into it, but it's a huge issue and a huge problem.
Yeah, I think before I'm a conservation person or an environment person, I'm a humanitarian, and all the work that we do is about human well-being in Micronesia, and it's about food security. And when you talk about fish, that's what we're talking about, people's food. And when we're out in the communities, that's what they're, fish is about their livelihoods, and that's what we're trying to help them. So a lot of our work, even though we're focusing on biodiversity, what we're talking about in the communities is really the fisheries and how to have the fisheries survive for the long-term well-being of the the local communities. So that's our take on it.
As the token ocean person on this panel, the only reason I wasn't grabbing the mic right away, because fish is my favorite topic, is I'm gonna say these comments as an islander and as part of the Hawaii Green Growth Initiative, and none of these comments reflect the official position of the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So let me preface that so I can be a little freer in my comments.